Hello there, my name's Liz Saunders. I work in leadership development. I'm on the faculty for the NHS Leadership Academy and work with individuals and organisations across the NHS.
And I'm Simon Bird. I'm also a member of the Leadership Academy faculty, like Liz, working with people in every corner of the NHS and at different stages of their career.
So we've put together a series of overheard conversations. Each one's got a different topic, and it's an opportunity for Simon and I to share some thoughts, some views and some insights in what we've seen work that we hope will be useful to you in your leadership journey.
So the exam question for us for the next 10 minutes or so is something that's exercising a lot of people, which is what's the leadership challenge when all the team you're asked to lead are sitting at home? Is that any different from when you see them more regularly? Is it more complicated, or does people really just need to get on with it? There's a lot being talked about, right?
Yeah, and as we were pondering on this, I was thinking, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I remember just before lockdown happened, or towards the back end of 2019, having a conversation with some senior NHS leaders who were challenged by, how do I manage a team when I am remote from them? So I think the fact that people are at home provides a bit of a different challenge, but it's only a nuance further on than the environment that lots of people were inhabiting already, where they were managing disparate teams across a big geographical patch. And how do you be present with those teams when you can't physically be in more than one place at once? So I think this challenge has been present, and the pandemic has fast-tracked the challenge into a completely different zone. And I think some of the solutions can apply to both.
I think you're right, and I think there's an article which people might be interested in reading in Harvard Business Review of early 2020, so the beginning of the pandemic. And there's an observation in the article about, there's over 10,000 books being written about virtual leading or leading virtually. And I think, like you said, there's something about geography then. And that was always when I always think, I have this picture in my head of this when I'm running a team and some of them are in Shanghai and some of them are in Cape Town and some of them are in Berlin. And it's kind of big corporate, and I had this picture of a big long boardroom with a spider phone in the middle, an enormous screen at the front, and you were having to dialing in somebody from the other side of the world. But I think what's different here is how the focus has really, really narrowed. And now, no, it's not just a big banker in Berlin, it's every single person with whom we see on a day-to-day basis in some roles, sitting possibly just a couple of miles away at the living room table. Do they need anything different? Yeah,
and I think that's an important distinction, actually, because we're also talking about teams that are used to being co-located.
Right,
so
yes.
Different from the kind of before times virtual leadership challenge, when you know that your teams are located in 7 different places. These are people who are used to all being in an office together, and now everybody's in their own little bubble. I think that is.
So there's 2 sides to this then. So there's one side thing we're going to talk about here, which is what the leadership challenge is. That's for you, but maybe we also have to think about how it might be for those other people who have also been jolted into their kitchen tables, not being able to bump into each other. So some of the thinking we've done beforehand, if I start walking us through it. So one of the concepts we landed on was clarity, how important clarity is. And clarity, of course, is something you might just say, every leader of course has to provide clarity to their team all the time. Why is that any different? Is it any different?
Well, I had 2 reactions immediately when you said clarity. One, that's always a really vital thing for leaders to do. And 2, well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because if anybody's got any clarity at the moment, well, they're doing better than I am. I'm saying that kind of facetiously, but it feels like of all the things to come by, clarity is one of the hardest at the moment. And I think, from work we've done before with teams, again, in the before times, clarity doesn't actually necessarily mean having all the answers. It means being able to define what is known and what is unknown, and stopping I think when you've got everybody sitting at home in their own houses, the space for a vacuum is that much greater, and into a vacuum comes conjecture and fantasy and conspiracy theories and all of that kind of stuff. And so I do think it's even more important than normal that leaders are being clear about what is known and what the unknowns are. Rather than if there's ambiguity, just think, well, I'll wait until there's certainty, because certainty is in short supply at the moment. So being clear on what isn't known is a good thing to do still.
Yeah, and I think certainly in my experience of working with people in leadership roles and management roles, team leader roles, providing clarity is something they can never do enough of.
Yeah.
And often, even when people say, but I've told people, I told them on Monday morning, how much more do people want? Well, the answer is more. So reflecting on that and thinking, okay, I still don't know, and I'm still going to let people know I haven't stopped thinking about problem X, and we still don't know what's happening, and there is another meeting. So even though, you will probably feel you are we're trying to over communicate, which we'll come on to, but you can never do enough.
No, I agree. And I also think, I've seen some teams work really successfully who sort of reconnect each week. Again, this is in before times, reconnect each week with a kind of, right, let's get back to what is it that this team is about, what are we trying to do, have almost a mission statement or a purpose statement or something like that. And I think at the moment, given how teams have been reconfigured and redeployed and whatever, kind of offering some clarity on what is it that we are about right now can be helpful for people, and how long do we think that we're going to be in this mode for is also a helpful indication. Because I think the other big challenge at the moment is it hasn't been the case before, has it, that everybody in your team is also going through massive uncertainty in their personal lives. Like, it's just not something that we're encountering. So this desire for clarity is going to be exacerbated by the global uncertainty that we're all living in. So the more you can give, the better.
Yes, which takes us nicely onto second of three concepts we landed on. So the second way is communication.
Yeah.
So I really miss, less so I'm independent now, but I can imagine when I was working in organizations, the value of just bumping into people and getting bits of micro information from people. So this is how you really build up the picture of what's going on in your world and in your job. Yeah. So the question going for leaders when everybody's at home in all these kind of literal separate bubbles, and lots of people are in bubbles at the moment, is what's the job of communication? Do you just do more of it? Do you do it differently? Thoughts?
I think there's different types. So I think there is a need for some clarity around communication. So for example, it might be that we're going to say, right, with this team, we're going to have a Monday morning meeting where we're going to go through kind of what the key objectives are for this week, or what the key business priorities are, or what the kind of newest information we've got is, or something like that. So you kind of know where you're getting it from. Or it might not be a meeting, it might be an email or a newsletter or whatever. I think the hardest bit is the bit you're talking about, the kind of incidental conversation and the soft intelligence that brings. And so how you recreate that. And I've had conversations with a number of different people about different ways of doing it. I know some teams have got a kind of more like a kind of coffee time that happens a couple of times a week on Teams, where they can just catch up. So it's not agenda-led, it's just a kind of chat. It's difficult, isn't it? Because you can't have the kind of side conversations that you would in real life in a Teams environment. So that works to a degree. I've also heard of people who say that they work with Teams on in the background, the video call function on in the background, with people who they would have worked closely with in the office, so that if stuff comes up, they can kind of just chat about it as they go. That's interesting, I think, and you might then start to have a conversation or ask a question of somebody that you wouldn't trouble them with an email about, and can also help those cursed with a preference for extroversion to get a little bit of a fix and be able to bounce ideas off somebody. Do you get the kind of corridor conversation, the soft intelligence that way? Maybe, maybe not. What do you think? What have you seen work?
I suppose what I've seen working is, I think there's a lesson from agile methodology here, and I say this because having worked at home for the last year, I hear my husband doing it every morning, and what I'm talking about is he is every morning at 10 a.m. he and his small team are online for 15 minutes. They talk on a video call. Right. And the purpose of that, this is part of the Agile methodology, is that they connecting with each other, say what they're hoping to achieve that day. And then sometimes they do it again at 5 o'clock, how it went. And then they do it again every morning at 10 o'clock. And they're in this rhythm.
Yeah.
It's normal. And there is some small talk that happens around I'm doing this, this, and this. Some small talk happens. And they have that, I think, he would never say this, I think they have this comfort of predicting they will see these faces every morning at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Which is some going to the office kind of mentality.
Yeah.
So I think that's another approach. Wouldn't work for everybody. And again, it's about context, about team. It works for a very stable team, I think.
Yeah.
But I think that where we are all working through what is different is we're all stumbling and making up as we go along in different teams. And so intervals are not the same between contact points. So again, we have this kind of what's going on. And I like your point earlier about where we have big holes, we're not quite sure what's happening, we make stories up.
Yeah.
Because that's what our brains will do, make stories up.
Yeah.
So I think there's something about leaders about being really clear about communication, content, methods, timing, and leaving space, maybe in meetings, not packing agendas to their very brim with business items, just leaving a little bit of airtime.
Yeah. I mean, when we're talking about when we're talking about communication there, it feels sort of very kind of organisationally focused or business focused. And of course, one of the things that having everybody at home does is kind of locate them in their actual lives. And I just wondered what your thinking was around the space for allowing space for that to be talked about, or how do you, I don't know, I've seen some interesting things about people adapting their working patterns because of what's going on at home. And so conversations happening about that in a more explicit way than I think would have happened in the before times.
So is that about people asking people what it is, well, how they want to work?
I think it's a mixture of leaders asking the question, but I think in many cases it's driven by team members saying, is it okay if I do it like this? Which is almost the wrong way around. You kind of want the leader to get in there first, I think, and to be asking the question of what works for you. And I think that comes, in the communication bracket, what is it that you need? What would be helpful? And I think
it takes us beautifully to the third idea there. Around and this third idea, which we call individualization, or maybe it's personalization. But the idea being, if you are now seeing your team as 12 boxes or 6 boxes on a screen fairly regularly, again, motherhood and apple pie would say, of course you know your team individually. That might be true to some extent about what they do at work, but now maybe you need to understand what it's like for them outside that box at home. Some people will be sitting in their kids' bedrooms. Some people will be sitting under the stairs. Yeah. Some people will just be trying to find a quiet place. Some people will have a glorious office setup.
Yeah.
Is there anything you need to know? And maybe I wonder, is there value in the leader spending additional time, recognizing they have to spend additional time asking each individual person separately, not in front of other people, tell me about life beyond this box, what's going on there, what do we need to be aware of?
Yeah, and I think, from what I've seen some really encouraging movement on this. So for example, I was working with a senior dietitian, and she was saying that a lot of her team have got young children, and it was in the homeschooling phase, and therefore they pediatric dietetic service, they started to move some clinics into the evening, and that became a kind of win-win-win in that it freed up her team to be available for their home life during the day. They could do their work in the evenings. It actually worked really nicely for the patients, the parents of the patients, who could then have a proper conversation without the children being around. So whilst I don't know that they would want to make that move permanently, although some of them might, it was a nice, it just made me think, actually it's making things work really well for your team might also help things work really well for end service users. and whether there's other opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily want to be doing that from the community hospital at 10 o'clock at night, but you might be prepared to do it from your home, although you then do need to factor in, well, where are people getting their downtime and time off if they're...
Well, exactly, and day could just becoming longer and longer. And
yeah.
Okay, so three ideas we've landed on. So we talked about clarity, talked about communication, and talked about individualization.
Yes.
Things that, yes, obviously they're important, but maybe any of us leading teams, maybe it's worth spending a little bit more time thinking just a little bit more about each of those ideas. Anything else to say, do you think?
I think, as always, reflexivity is key. So where am I in this as a leader? What is it that you're kind of bringing to the party, and thinking about how you need to adapt your style to be able to get the best out of other people, and also being really conscious of what your preferences might be around some of these and how they might be the same as or different from other people. So the temptation will be to try and offer what you would want, and that might not be what everybody on your team wants. So a bit of time thinking about where you are in this as a leader, I think, is a helpful addition.
Great. Thanks, Liz.